Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Once again, we are going to talk about Afghanistan situation because Afghanistan situation is still unfolding. And at this moment, despite so many indications, we still don't know which way the wind is going to blow. One aspect is very important. On one side, we know that because of Doha Agreement and because of all the utterances of Taliban spokespeople, we are going to expect and we are expecting some kind of moderate version of Taliban government striking contrast to what was a government 25 years ago. But despite that, we haven't seen a government still, so we don't know what exactly will happen in coming days. And at this moment, it seems to be a split screen reality. On one side, there's talk of moderation. On the other side, we keep on hearing about some very aggressive steps, especially in the provincial capitals or cities elsewhere in the country. There is a possibility that the Taliban entire body might not be that much integrated or united, but we still have to wait and see what exactly becomes of that. On the other side, there is the reality of Afghan Taliban being the de facto power in Kabul. While this is true, and we keep on seeing the economic indicators actually going down, and there are predictions about the possibility of some kind of economic collapse. On the other side, the world community is busy talking about the ways to introduce some kind of humanitarian intervention. But here, it is important to remember that expecting that if a Taliban government is formed tomorrow, as it is being indicated, that we might at least see some structural or rudimentary structure of a government by tomorrow. If that happens, don't expect that immediately everybody in the world is going to acknowledge it or recognize it. But on the other side, there is the reality that the people of Afghanistan have suffered for past 40 years, and now once again the economic situation seems to be dire. So we are going to talk about all these aspects and try to reconcile all the different matters that might actually seem disparate realities. While I was talking about the rest of the situation, we also saw that while there is some difference between the fact on ground and what was being said earlier, or what is still being said in front of cameras, there is also an important aspect of noise, deliberate noise. For example, 2 days ago, we saw a very interesting claim. A clip started, going viral on the social media, showing a helicopter actually carrying or lifting a person, flying a person in the air, and it was claimed that it is Afghan Taliban who is hanging people with that helicopter. Later on, as details emerged, that person himself who was hanging from the plane was alive and himself a Talib and was trying to affix a flag, in which he failed. But when we started tracing the origin, the fact emerged that it was Indian media handles which were actually spreading the fake news. So we are going to talk about these aspects as well, the need for caveats, the need to focus on the reality, and we are going to talk about what is important and what is going to happen. In order to help us understand these issues at this moment, I have one guest who has joined me in the studio and one has joined me on Skype. We are expecting 2 more. The moment they come, I'm going to introduce them as well. But right now, in the studio with me is Brigadier Retired Rashid Wali Janjua Sahab, who is acting president of Islamabad Policy Research Institute, which is a premier think tank in Islamabad. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And then Tariq Farhadi, a senior regional analyst, an Afghan, has also very kindly joined us on Skype, sir. Farhadi Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. We are anticipating two more guests, one of whom is actually currently taking seat. Right. The third guest who has joined us is Michael Kugelman, who is Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia with a very important institution in Washington. And he has very kindly joined us as well. Michael Kugelman, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. With your permission, gentlemen, I have to start with Farhadi Saab. Farhadi Saab, if you remember, initially when we were interacting, you were very optimistic. Last time when you appeared in this program, you were not very optimistic. You were pointing out that the economic situation is really going down. What is your take on the current situation? Are you still hopeful that there's going to be some, inclusive government that is going to take shape in Kabul, and then it will be able to help Afghan come out of the economic crisis?
Well, greetings. It's great to be with you tonight. I'm happy that the level of violence in Afghanistan has gone down considerably. 20 days ago, if we listened to the spokesman of the Ghani Ministry of Defense every day, they were killing 400 people, and the other side was saying that they are killing 300 people. So right or wrong, the level of violence was very high. And anybody who died in Afghanistan left a widow and left several children without a father forever. This is finished. Right now in Kabul, there is peace. The airport negative scene is finished. The planes are gone. The Americans said that they missed evacuating another 100,000 people who were the real people they should have been evacuating. Among the evacuated, there are people who have jumped on planes who might never qualify to become a refugee in the West, and the next headache will be how to send them back to Afghanistan, unfortunately. And but Kabul right now is peaceful. The crisis right now is a crisis of governance and a crisis of poverty and economic crisis. On the crisis of governance, because you mentioned that Afghanistan has been at war for 40 years, I'm old enough to remember that when the communists came to power through force, they announced a government of communists. You had to be a communist to be in the government. If you were not a communist, you couldn't be in the government, you were excluded. We don't want Taliban to do the same. Taliban have come by force. If they announce a government where there is only Taliban, we will go back to this period where in order to be in the government, you have to subscribe to an ideology. In this case, the ideology of Taliban. In the former case, the ideology of the communists.
Right.
And you know what happens in a case like this? Social discontent appears. Right now in Afghanistan, there's a lot of young people who are weary of the Taliban. They don't know the Taliban. They have seen the Taliban through media represented as violent people. And the Taliban fighters who are in Kabul right now, frankly, they scare our young generation in Kabul. So the Taliban, if they want to be successful, and they haven't proven this yet because they had a meeting in Kandahar for 3 days and they didn't invite any non-Taliban figures. Right. So they sort of talk about everything amongst themselves. They have to come out of themselves and allow non-Taliban to be seen in seats of governance with them. I'm not saying necessarily the faces of before, but non-Taliban should be included in the government.
Right. Farhadi Saab, allow me to bring in Michael Kugelman as well. Let us move on to other parts of how the situation is unfolding in Kabul. Michael Kugelman, let me ask you about the fact that we still haven't seen any government in Kabul. On the other side, while there is talk of possibility of formation of a government by tomorrow, we haven't seen any, sand shifting on ground. On the other side, we have also seen Panjshir region once again has become a conflict zone, and there is a battle going on there. Your take on the overall situation in Afghanistan right now?
Right. Well, yeah, we've been hearing for a number of days that it's going to be very soon when the Taliban announces its new government, and I think that it really is just a matter of time. If you want to look at this with a glass half full approach, one could argue that the Taliban is trying to be very careful and deliberate as it thinks about how to establish this government, and that it's not waiting because it wants to do something nefarious. And I think it is on its way. I mean, there's already been a lot of media reportage indicating what things could look like. It seems like there's going to be a 12-member leadership council comprised of Taliban leaders, including, quite frankly, some of the really brutal ones. You've got a Haqqani network leader that's going to be occupying a top spot. There's also indications that women will be a part of the government, but they may not hold senior roles, which is unfortunate, but quite frankly not surprising. But still, it's unclear. I think we will find out soon enough. I do think that many countries, particularly in the West, will be watching very carefully to see what the government looks like and to see how inclusive it is, because that will give an initial indication as to how the Taliban intends to govern and how it intends to project itself to the world. Now, in terms of the resistance in the Panjshir, I don't think we should overstate the significance of that resistance. You're looking at, as I understand it, you're looking at a resistance force of several thousand fighters, which is not all that many. What we've seen over the last few months is that the Taliban had unfortunately done such a great job of removing or preemptively eliminating any possible opposition or resistance to the group. So what you have at the Panjshir is really all you got in terms of resistance. There's not much more to it. If they were to fight it out, I imagine the Taliban would eventually win militarily. I know there's hope to have some type of negotiation. There had been negotiations earlier that didn't work out. But I think that there's very little prospect that this resistance is going to go anywhere. Certainly, I don't think that the resistance could look to get the type of external backing that it was able to depend on the last time around, when you had the Northern Alliance enjoying the support of Iran and India and Russia and eventually the U.S. But I think that, Torek had talked about the governance crisis for the Taliban. If the Taliban struggles to deal with this severe economic crisis, if it struggles to rein in the problem of terrorism, which is only going to intensify given that you have its rival ISIS trying to prevent it from consolidating power.
Right. We seem to have momentarily lost Michael Kugelman. We are going to connect and come back. But let me come to the studio. Brigadier Saab, you have been very patiently waiting for your turn. So far we have been talking about Taliban as an insurgency and predominant power in Kabul, right? But now comes a phase to transform from an insurgency into a political force. And there seems to be some doubt about their capacity to transform into that. What is your take on it?
Yes, I agree with you, because an insurgency is fought. An insurgency is a different kettle of fish altogether compared to running a functioning government. Yeah. There are challenges, and anybody who tries to downplay, I think it would not be very realistic. Okay. They are up against heavy odds. The first amongst them is the international recognition.
First formation of government, then recognition.
Yes, formation of
they
government.
They haven't formed a government so far.
And they are into a conclave, reportedly, Abatullah Akhundzada, which is their...
conclave actually concluded on Monday, I think, the 3-day conclave.
Yeah, but the process is still on, and they were into a consultative mode, and some of the names were bandied about, but nothing conclusive so far has come about.
All right.
So there are rumors that they might have a large cabinet, as far as 20 plus. Okay. They might include some ethnic Hazaras, Uzbeks and Tajiks as well, and including some women. That is a possibility, but you cannot say with certainty till the time they announce a cabinet. And unless they announce an inclusive, broad-based cabinet, which would be challenged with the governance issues, I think there will be a lot of problem because they need to moderate their
Stance.
the way their stance, the way they govern.
And that actually takes us back to the question about their ability to transform into a political force. At this moment, when you were fighting a war, you were united because everybody was after the same prize, that was Kabul. Not that you have taken over. The problem is whether they are going to be united or not. Haqqani seem to be a very different kettle of fish, right? Very different element. Then they are, within their own hierarchy, there are three people who can be contenders for power. So do you think that there is a possibility that they might be able to transform as quickly as possible?
You see, there are problems, but I don't, I don't believe that there are insuperable barriers to their forging a unanimity of views. I think on that score they are pretty comfortable.
Right. Let me welcome our fourth guest who has just joined us, Barrister Muhammad Ali Saf, who is a senior analyst, a career politician also. But if I start introducing him, I think half of the program will go in that because he holds triple PhD as well. Thank you very much, sir, for joining me in the studio. Let me ask you about the same question. So far, we have seen that the Taliban were an insurgency. Now they are actually trying to become a political force. And when the US evacuation completed, we thought that immediately they are going to come up with a government. They haven't. Do you think there is a possibility that it might take them some time to become a political force?
Well, Pitafi Sahab, my take on this is that the very reason that Taliban have so far been in negotiation and discussions with various political forces or groups or ethnic and religious factions in Afghanistan, which were in part of the former government of Ashraf Karzai. So the very fact that they are negotiating with them shows that they have now realized the fact that they are now facing a political challenge, and their attitude, their behavior is more political than when they entered Kabul for the first time in 1996. At that time, they were merely a resistance, a guerrilla force. Now they have matured up over the last few years into a political party, I would say, not registered as such formally, but yes, they have a deeper political understanding. And one thing I would like to share with you is, insofar as Afghan psyche is concerned, myself being a Pashtun, we have this inherent democratic psychological attitude, especially when you are confronted in a challenging situation, and Taliban are in a challenging situation. And I don't see, yes, they will have difficulty in adjusting with people with whom they have ideological differences, like the former communists in Afghanistan, pro-Soviets, and those people who had run away from Afghanistan in 1992 and then they came back after 2001. There are those four. Then there are ultra-nationalist Afghan forces who have a socialist or a liberal
bent of mind.
So with those people, they might have some kind of ideological issues with with adjustment. However, insofar as I think the former Mujahideen commanders are concerned, like Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, Abdur Rasul Sayyaf, they are the most potent commanders at that time.
Right. When you were comparing today's situation with 1996, it actually reminded me of a clip that Christine Manfur actually put out today. And she actually put out a clip where she's interviewing the leader of Taliban, Stanakzai, in 1996. He was quite young at that time, but he was more or less saying the same things. Now, once again, he's repeating the same things, but we didn't see those things becoming reality. How is today's reality different than 1996?
Well, of course, there are differences at the moment. I mean, I would go into clarifying those issues and will elaborate upon them. But number one, you see, if we are looking at or we are expecting Taliban to change their ideological orientation from a theocratic Islamic group to a liberal secular group, then we are living in fool's paradise. They will not do that because their power center, their ideological motivation of their fighters is basically that ideology. So they cannot. If they do that, they will just fizzle out and they will just get dissolved automatically. Their support base will erode. They will have to stick to their ideology insofar as Islamic understanding, their own Islamic understanding is concerned, and their own version of Sharia, that or their own worldview. That I don't think that there will be, we must expect any radical changes in that or transformation in that. But yes, of course, 1996 was totally different. At that time, they were a reactionary force which actually came into existence as a result of the reaction against warlords and lawlessness in Afghanistan. Now they are not. They have fought against a superpower and a mighty army of coalition forces. In the process, they have not just matured militarily or gained experience, but also politically, because they have realized that in the last 2 decades of fighting, that they cannot survive in this world if they stick to their own old habits. And I think that Afghans are a mature nation. I mean, we should not take them just because they are wearing turbans or have long beards and we think that they are like not civilized or they don't understand the intricacies of civilized relationships. I think they do understand that, but there will be problems in adjusting with people with whom they have contrasts.
Huge difference.
Yeah, in ideologies.
With your permission, I'm going back to Tariq Farhadi Saab. Tariq Saab, let me ask you another question regarding. I'm told that at this moment we have Michael Kugelman on telephone with us. Michael, once again, the issue of unity of Taliban. Is there a possibility, because the images that come from far-flung areas of Afghanistan seem different from what is being said in Kabul? Do you think that Afghan Taliban is a united force, or we are going to see all the fault lines in coming days? Michael. Right, there seems to be some technical problem. We are going to come back to this, and I will request the producers to keep on informing me when there is a technical problem. Let me come back to Brigadier Saab. Brigadier Saab, unity among Taliban.
As I said, so far they appear united. Disunity is not one of their Achilles' heels, mind you, because they have just entered Kabul, and their field component is very well motivated. They have tasted victory, and they are in the ascendant. So in these, all these conditions point towards solidarity and a cohesiveness, which they have displayed so far. And mind you, there is a binding glue ideology which binds them together. They have a spiritual head.
I asked this because there is a very split screen reality. On one side, it is being said that children, women and children, girls will be allowed to go to school or workplaces. And then we hear from at least a few cities that girls above 6th grade have been asked to stay at home and not resume their studies. So there is always a possibility of certain hardliners within their ranks who want to actually implement their own agenda, and there might be a clash in coming days.
Those hardliners would always be there.
Okay.
But we should understand that when a central edict is issued by the spiritual leadership, and now it's going to be temporal as well when they assume the political control, they will all obey. All field components of their governance, maybe the governors, and in some of the provinces they would need, I think, other ethnicities too. For example, in Panjshir Valley, maybe in Bamiyan. So they might not give so many cabinet slots to other ethnicities at the central cabinet level, but at the governors level, because Afghanistan has 34 provinces. So they might.
Are we going to see women also being represented? Are we sure about that?
I think there would be some token presence, but we might not, see a lot of women initially.
We have never seen women in any bodies of Afghan Taliban. So how do you expect them to actually all of a sudden
we had
create
also
a space?
never seen Afghan Taliban spokesman being interviewed by a lady correspondent. So things have
No,
changed.
in 1996, Christiane Amanpour interviewed Stanexai.
But that was not a kind of an interview.
Not Afghan woman, right.
Not Afghan.
I understand. Sir, very quickly, you want to comment, sir?
Yeah,
Then
insofar as this representation of women in the cabinet is concerned, you see, you have to look at, you take into consideration the social cultural norms of a society as well. Not saying that women should not be given representation, they must be given representation. There's no qualms in my mind about it. But even when the communists took over in the 1990s, in the early 90s, remember, even during Babrak Karmal's regime, there was hardly just one woman in the cabinet. Her name was Dr. Anahita Ratibzad, right? Being communist, being secular, being absolutely
was
non-religious. Yeah, there was only one woman. She was the head.
Still one.
Yeah, one. But what I'm saying is, you would have expected communists and socialists and liberals to have more representation of women there, but it wasn't. So Afghan society has its own compulsions, and therefore, yeah. Please.
With your permission, because our guests have rejoined us, Tariq Farhadi Saab, your take on unity among Afghan Taliban. It is an important question because we keep on seeing statements which contradict the physical reality, at least in some parts of Afghanistan. How do you reconcile the two?
Well, you see, they have come to a cake and now they have to cut it and divide. And the next problem that they have is to explain to to Taliban, that they have to gift some positions of power to non-Taliban. If they want to succeed, Taliban will not be able to govern Afghanistan in the long run if they have a Taliban-only government. That's impossible. Discontent will rise. General discontent will rise in Afghanistan. Just as I explained earlier that discontent rose about communists, which were sort of one group, and either you had to be a communist to be in the government, either you had no role. Here, either you have to be a Talib, and for us it's too late to be a Talib, for others as well inside Afghanistan.
Right. Farhadi Saab, I understand that you are, stressing the need for inclusive government. But my question primarily was unity within Afghan Taliban's ranks, because we see very, very clear shades. One is Haqqani group, right? The others, the regular Taliban also have three leaders. One is, of course, at the head, at the top of leadership. But then there's Mullah Yaqub and there's also Mullah Baradar. So we have to actually see how they are going to actually gel together, and whether the next government is going to be, by someone who actually rules Afghanistan by virtue of edicts, or they are going to be technocrats.
Well, the fear here, what I see on the ground is that the Haqqanis have come to Kabul. They have considered a little bit Kabul their area. They have occupied some houses. They have gone to some houses that are empty or rented before by private citizens to NGOs. Those NGOs are gone. They have just gone and occupied those houses, the Haqqanis. And it seems like they consider that southwestern Afghanistan, Jalalabad, Nangarhar, Kabul will be sort of their area. The Kandahar Taliban are happy with being in Kandahar. Yes, there might be a leadership that will be Amir al-Mu'mineen for all the Taliban. But inside, I can feel already that there are some distributions of geography and what has been attained by power. These accounts of Taliban going and occupying houses of private people who were previously rental houses by the Haqqani group, not by the Mullah Brother group, is that there are two styles actually of Taliban. They have gone, the Haqqani people have been more active in going and seeking to visit with leaders, Karzai, Abdullah, the Gailanis, and they have tried to take pictures with them. This is all the Haqqani group which has done this. The Mullah brother is back in Kandahar. They gravitate around Kandahar. That's where they're comfortable. So let us see how the leadership takes shape. Our challenge is that we are trying to reach out to the Taliban to say it is smarter at this point that they have established non-violence in Afghanistan to now succeed the governance part. And for the governance part, there is a need to accept others.
Right, and that is very important point. Michael Kugelman, while we are looking at how the government formation is taking place, let me ask you, if tomorrow, as we have been hearing, we are going to see a Taliban government, or at least a government in Kabul which is supported by Afghan Taliban, and it actually seeks recognition from all over the world, what are major steps that it will have to take to ensure that it is recognized by all over the world, or powers all over the world? If you can actually give me breakdown in numbers, number 1, number 2, number 3.
Well, I would identify 3 criteria that I think many countries, though not all, will be looking for. And I should state up front that some countries will have lower bars than others in terms of what they would be looking for the Taliban before being willing to accord recognition. But I think, first of all, thinking in terms of the U.S. and many other countries in the West, three things. One, to what extent is the government inclusive? To what extent do you have a fair number of women and non-Taliban leaders playing not only a role but a prominent role where they actually have power? And I don't think that those assurances will come out. Number 2 is counterterrorism. I think many countries will be looking for indications that the Taliban is intent on denying space to international terrorist groups on its soil. And 3 is the issue of well, I think I'd highlight those above all else. But the third one is human rights. But I think that that's just so unrealistic that we shouldn't look at it as something that the West in particular can look for. I imagine that some regional players, such as China, Russia, Pakistan, some of the Central Asian countries, I think for them what they would really be looking for is security assurances, counterterrorism assurance. All of the regional players, as you know, they have their own concerns about terrorism, right? Of course, for Pakistan, it's the TTP. For China, it's the ETIM. For Russia and a number of others, it is ISIS. And as we know, I think the Taliban will be more willing to give assurances on cracking down on ISIS than it would be some of these other groups. But I think that what it comes down to is if we're looking for the first set of countries that would be willing to recognize the Taliban, I think that they would just be looking for some assurances from the Taliban on the security front and on the counterterrorism front to ensure that there's enough stability for these countries to engage. And that, of course, opens up the possibility for financial assistance. And clearly, I mean, as you know, the Taliban really does care about recognition and legitimacy now, because it knows that if it gets a critical mass of countries to provide recognition and legitimacy, that will allow the international financial assistance to come in. And the Taliban is in a tough spot from the top because of the fact that the West has essentially taken $10 billion in Afghan foreign reserves off the table, so to speak. So that's why I think we'll look for the Taliban to do what it can to ensure that it gets some initial recognition from at least a few countries, presumably within the region.
Okay. Few countries might actually take the plunge initially, and then everybody might join later. But let me, Brigadier Saab, be very candid about this. It seems to me that there are 2 elements here, right? One is realpolitik, and the other is the image. Realpolitik is primarily about your land not being used against any third country. And the softer side is you don't become an image liability by being brutal to your own people, by not being inclusive, or perpetually being lost in civil war. Do you think at this moment these are the realities, and in the end it is terrorism which is going to define the fate of Afghan Taliban?
I think there are 3 dimensions that will define that. Yeah. One is the political, one is security, and one is the humanitarian angle. Yeah. The political angle is what kind of government they establish, how inclusive that is, how broad-based, how well they govern.
But how is that inclusive government going to affect powers like Washington or Kremlin, or for that matter, China?
Because that will placate them. That is one of their demands, that they have a broad-based and inclusive government.
Yeah, but
So-
that is an image liability.
So that will pander to their sensitivities that
Okay.
they have. And the second is the security angle. Security angle concerns, very rightly pointed out by Kugelman, the regional countries more, because China, Pakistan, even Russia and the Central Asian states have their own concerns.
And Iran.
And Pakistan has genuine concerns regarding TTP, BLA, nationalists operating from safe sanctuaries. There's a question of ISIS-K, and all those issues would be very seriously impact the relationships if they do not control, and if they are somehow unable to control.
I must thank you for bringing up TTP, right? Last time you were in this program, you said that once they take over, we are going to see some improvement. So interestingly, when it comes to TTP, their media cell has actually released some numbers, alleged numbers, and I don't have any way to actually verify that, where they say that they have accelerated their activities within Pakistan, and in the month of August, their operations, the number of their operations was higher than the rest of the months. So Afghan Taliban have already taken over. Why hasn't it gone down?
They have taken over, but they haven't established a government so far. And it's true that some TTP activity has picked up pace, but you must not discount the presence of some spoilers. Their legacy of those spoilers. For 20 long years, India has cultivated academia, media, and the security agencies. They have permeated every nook and cranny of Afghan establishment.
Right.
It will take a little while for Taliban to get the handle on the things, and the taste of pudding would be in the eating. And this time around, international community has no tolerance to give them a carte blanche for what they do or what they don't do with these elements who are
Right.
Daesh, ISIS-K,
No,
TTP.
No,
But
I
it's a
totally
serious-
get your point about them not being in control, still not in control, but the areas where TTP is allegedly hiding are the areas where actually Afghan Taliban have their strongholds. So that was a concern, that's why I was asking. But allow me to go back to Barrister Saab. Barrister Saab, we are talking about a government which hasn't been made yet. You are a student of political science as well. We heard yesterday that it is neither going to be an emirate nor a republic, but there is going to be some very interesting kind of government structure. What are you hearing? What kind of structure is going to emerge?
Yes, there must. There definitely will be some problems in the in basically the designing of the government that for Afghanistan by Afghan Taliban at the moment, because they have their own emirate model, which I'm sure that they are fully aware of the fact that it would not work now at the in their second phase of ruling over Afghanistan.
Right.
The other issue is that they cannot go for an open democracy and a republic style democracy, because that would go that would mean inclusive government in the sense that everybody will be able to participate and decide what kind of people
And
are
they'll have to contest elections.
yeah, and also and they are not a political force, as I said. They are a militant organization at present, with of course an attempt or efforts to develop their political tentacles, but that will take time. But I think that this will be a question mark, and they may be coming up. That's why I think that the negotiations are going on and discussions are going on, and it's taking time. But I think insofar as the issue of recognition, whatever political dispensation they come up with, we will see. But in my opinion, their main challenge is to ensure the security situation in Afghanistan,
Right.
all over Afghanistan. For example, the border areas where Pakistan has concerns with TTP and ISIS, yes, they need to control that. But also other parts of Afghanistan, like even Panjshir. Panjshir is a problem now. If this problem persists and it is not addressed through peaceful means or through military means, whatever, this may become a headache for them in the long run, because international stakeholders and local opponents will use this particular soil to keep them under stress. Number two, a most important criteria, in my opinion, is that we must remember that Afghanistan is a tribal society, and it has tribal compulsions, compulsions of a tribal society. During the Soviet occupation as well, tribal areas and border areas outside, rather I would say rural areas, majority of them were not under the control of the Babrak Karmal or Dr. Najib's government at that time as well. There were mujahideen roaming around in those areas. During the US occupation of Afghanistan, probably the major cities, yes, but border areas and all those were in a way like a free-for-all kind of places, where of course Afghan government had its presence in the posts and all that. But the others, their opponents, Taliban and other militant groups, were also freely operating. Right. So in my opinion, as I said earlier, I believe that if Taliban can manage the security situation there, which they have actually in the past as well, and even during the US occupation of Afghanistan, they were able to assert control over activities in their areas of control.
Right. But
so that will define their future, basically.
Right, and that actually proves that realpolitik is at the crux of the matter. But let me ask you once again about the structure. Because what we hear is that there is going to be a spiritual leader or Amir or whosoever it is. The Taliban's Amir is going to be that. But under him there will be a prime minister and then a shura, perhaps also a cabinet. Who's going to be prime minister? A Talib or someone who is a politician who understands statecraft?
Well, Pitafi Sahab, the foremost issue is that election of what you call it, Ulasi Jarga or Masharano Jarga, as they call it, the National Assembly and the Senate. I mean, that through direct voting is impossible in the existing situation, right?
Why?
It is because elections can't be held. There is a security situation has to be addressed first. Then they have to augment and strengthen their control over Afghanistan in different cities. Local administration is in disarray. They have to manage all those things in order to be able to create a situation where they can have a free and fair election. So whatever kind of election is conducted at present, or maybe in the next 2 months, that will have an international discredibility. I mean, people would accuse it of or blame it for not being fair and free. However, insofar as the form of government is concerned, I believe it would have a democratic facade, but it would be mostly like Iranian style government. That's what I mean. There will be an ideological control over the policy of the government, yes, and also induction of people in important positions. They will have to have some kind of ideological orientation and affiliation with their theocratic model, rather than being totally liberal or secular, or for that matter.
My concern only is about Brigadier Sahab, is primarily about how they govern. Because Afghan Taliban recently, the people we are seeing don't have any experience of politics. And if they are going to appoint one of the mullahs as the prime minister, there becomes a huge problem of how you are going to govern. Then there are two structures. Afghan state has its own bureaucracy, its own structure, and Afghan Taliban have their own organogram, their own structure. How will they reconcile the two?
I think they will have to have a member of Taliban as their chief executive, so to speak, below the spiritual leader. So this would be some kind of a
Mullah Baradar?
Maybe Mullah Baradar.
Or Yaqub?
I think brother would be more acceptable.
Yaqub is too young to be.
He is 32.
Yeah, but I think he doesn't have.
So I believe it would be a variant of Iranian model of Vilayat-e-Faqih, guardian council. The Taliban have their own, guardian, council, shura. I think out of that they'll pick up the cabinet, and the bureaucracy they would have to co-opt government functionaries, those who are technocrats, because they have to run a functional government. Their municipal services have to be run, banking services have to be run. There's going to be a run on the banks as per some estimates that the whole financial system would collapse in another next 2 to 3 weeks. If
technically it has collapsed. The currency hasn't, but banking system has.
They're still coasting along, but after 2 more weeks, it would be a complete, collapse. So in order to avert that and to provide a semblance of order, policing function has to be restored. Somebody has to do the municipal services. Somebody has to take care of.
Right. And
humanitarian angles.
above everything else, they have to have a finance minister, right? Barrister, so very quickly, are they going to have a Talib as the finance minister or some technocrat?
Pitafi Sahab, I think it does not matter at all whether the finance minister is a Talib or a technocrat. Because you see, it's the ideological orientation and your ideological what you call it identity which is important in such type of governments rather than the technocratic issue. Because I think, for example, a foreign minister is not a mullah. If he's a former Mujahideen leader with Islamic orientations, why should they have problems? And I think they understand that, and they probably will allow people of having experience in foreign affairs, in finance, in other issues.
Stanek Zai is tipped
could
to
be
be
one
the
of them,
next
yes.
foreign minister.
But let's not get into the individuals, but I'm just talking in general. The other issue is that why are we obsessed with kind of a Western style of parliamentary democracy in Afghanistan? Why do we think that that's the panacea for all the problems? Because Hamid Karzai, Ashraf Ghani, they were all the product of that type of imposed democracy on Western model. But what did they do? Did they achieve? Afghanistan's realities have to be taken, and I think it's.
I get when you are talking about the parliamentary democracy, even though Iran also had to evolve a parliament. But regarding finance minister, ideology doesn't run economy. That was the concern that I had. So you have to have a technocrat who understand how economy works.
I'm sure they would find somebody.
And I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Barrister Muhammad Ali Saif sir, thank you very much sir, for being part of the program. Brigadier retired Rashid Wali Janjua sir, thank you very much sir, for being part of the program as well. Michael Kugelman and Tariq Farhadi Sahiban actually joined us earlier. Let me thank them as well through the screen. Viewers, this was discussion on the subject. We still have to wait how things are going to shape up. Let us hope in coming days we see some productive and encouraging results. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.